He's been sleeping with me. Her jealous best friend confessed her affair with her billionaire fiancé on her wedding day, but the bride's next move left the guests speechless. The officiant's voice echoed through the grand ballroom of the Sinclair Hotel, his words hanging in the air like a benediction. If anyone has objections to this union, speak now or forever. Hold your peace. Silence. 300 guests held their breath, waiting for the formality to pass, waiting for the ceremony to continue, waiting for the happily ever after everyone had come to witness. Then a voice shattered everything. I do. Heads turned. Gasps rippled through the crowd like shockwaves. Alice Morgan stood in the front row, maid of honor, best friend, sister in everything but blood. Her hands trembled, but her voice carried with devastating clarity. I object because he's been sleeping with me. The ballroom exploded. Phones came out. Cameras flashed. Someone screamed. But Julie Carter, the bride in her $200,000 Vera Wang gown, stood perfectly still at the altar. She didn't drop her bouquet of white peonies. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply turned her head slowly, looking at Alice, then at her fiancé, Austin Reed, then back at Alice. Her voice when it came was quiet, controlled, each word a surgical blade cutting through the chaos. How long? Alice's eyes filled with tears. But there was something else there too, something that looked almost like triumph. 6 months. Since your engagement party. 6 months. Julie did the math in her head while 300 people watched. 6 months of girls' nights. 6 months of wedding planning. 6 months of Alice sleeping over, helping with seating charts, addressing invitations, pretending to be excited. 6 months of sisterhood that had been contaminated with betrayal from the very beginning. Austin reached for her hand. Julie, I can explain. This isn't what you think. She meant nothing. It was a mistake. Julie stepped back, smooth and deliberate, her wedding dress rustling like whispers of judgment. Don't. One word. But it carried such absolute finality that Austin froze, his hands suspended in midair, his face draining of color. Julie turned to face the crowd, aunts and uncles, college friends, business partners, society editors, influencers, all of them recording this moment, uploading it, making her devastation into entertainment that would trend within the hour. She lifted her chin, her voice steady despite the earthquake happening beneath her ribs. There won't be a wedding today. She handed her bouquet to the flower girl, a confused 6-year-old in a tulle dress. She kissed the child's forehead gently. Then Julie Carter turned and walked back down the aisle she had walked up just 10 minutes earlier, not running, not fleeing, walking with the kind of grace that hurt to witness because it was so undeserved, so hard-won, so utterly devastating in its composure. And that's when something unexpected happened. Seth Bailey, the best man, Austin's business partner, the quiet one everyone overlooked, left his position at the altar. He fell into step beside Julie without touching her, without speaking, just walking beside her as she made her exit through a ballroom that had gone completely silent except for the sound of her heels on marble and the click of camera phones capturing her humiliation. Behind them, chaos erupted, but Julie didn't look back. She walked through those doors into the lobby, and in that moment, her old life ended, and something new, something painful, something that would eventually become beautiful, began. Now, you might be asking yourself, what happened next? How did Julie survive this? Who was Seth Bailey, and why did he walk away from his best friend to stand beside a woman whose world had just shattered? And what happened to Austin and Alice? Did they get their happily ever after, or did karma have other plans? Family, I'm going to tell you a story about betrayal, about grace under fire, about the difference between performing love and actually living it. I'm going to tell you how a woman who lost everything in one moment built an empire from ashes, how the man who loved her silently for 6 years finally got his chance, and how the two people who thought they could destroy her ended up destroying only themselves. But before we get into all of that, I need you to do something for me right now. If you believe that grace under fire is more powerful than any revenge, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. If you've ever had to rebuild yourself after someone you trusted broke, drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching from. Or just type, "I'm with you, Mr. Hearthline." I read every single comment, and your stories inspire mine. This isn't just a story about a wedding that didn't happen. This is a story about what happens when you choose dignity over drama, when you choose building over bitterness, when you choose yourself even when it costs you everything you thought you wanted. So settle in, family. Get comfortable. My beautiful family, welcome to Mr. Hearthline Stories. May the Almighty shield your heart from those who smile while sharpening knives behind their backs. May your discernment be sharper than any betrayal. May your courage be louder than any humiliation. And may your peace be untouchable by those who thought breaking you would be easy. Remember, family, those who betray the good-hearted often destroy themselves. Not because you curse them, not because you fight them, but because betrayal is a poison that kills from the inside out. Now, let me take you back before the wedding disaster, back before the betrayal, back to when everything looked perfect, when Julie Carter thought she had found her fairy tale, when she had no idea that the two people she trusted most in the world were building a nightmare behind her back. Let me show you how it all began. 6 years before that catastrophic wedding day, Julie Carter was 23 years old, fresh out of culinary school, and working the biggest catering event of her young career. The Sinclair Hotel, the same place where her wedding would eventually implode, was hosting a charity gala for childhood literacy. 500 guests, 12 courses, and Julie was responsible for the seafood station. She worked in the kitchen with focused intensity, her hands moving with practiced precision as she plated seared scallops with brown butter and microgreens. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the industrial air conditioning. The head chef barked orders in French. Waiters rushed in and out with empty trays and harried expressions. Julie loved every second of it. This was her element. Fire and flavor, and the alchemy of turning raw ingredients into something beautiful, something that nourished people, something that mattered. She was so focused on her work that she didn't notice the man who'd wandered into the kitchen until he spoke. "You make food look like art." Julie looked up, startled. Guests never came into the kitchen. It was an unspoken rule, a boundary between the world of service and the world of being served. The man standing 3 feet away was tall, handsome in that polished way that came from money and good genetics. Dark hair styled with product, a tuxedo that probably cost more than Julie made in a month. A smile that looked practiced but not insincere. "It is art," Julie replied, returning her attention to the scallops. "Just art you can eat." The man laughed. "I'm Austin Reed." Julie's hands paused for just a fraction of a second. Everyone knew who Austin Reed was. Forbes 30, under 30. Tech wunderkind, the man who'd turned dorm room code into a company worth $500 million. His face had been on magazine covers, on TED Talk stages, on billboards advertising innovation and disruption and the future. "I know who you are," Julie said, still not looking up from her station. "And you are?" "Busy." Austin laughed again, and this time it sounded genuine. "Fair enough, but I wanted to tell you that the scallops were incredible. Best I've ever had." Julie finally looked at him properly. "Thank you. Did you train in France?" "Chicago. Kendall College." "Well, whoever taught you knew what they were doing." Austin pulled a business card from his pocket. "I'm looking for a personal chef, someone who can cook like this but also isn't afraid to experiment. Someone who understands that food is about experience, not just sustenance. Would you be interested?" Julie took the card, her fingers leaving a small smudge of butter on the expensive cardstock. "I already have a job. This would pay better." "How do you know what I make?" "Because I'm offering you 3 times whatever it is." Julie looked at him, trying to determine if this was real or some kind of rich person game. "Why me?" "Because in a room full of people trying to impress me, you're the only one who didn't even look up when I walked in." Austin's smile shifted into something more real. "And because that scallop was perfect. If you can make something that good under pressure in a chaotic kitchen, I want to know what you can do with time and resources and freedom to create." Julie should have said no, should have been suspicious, should have recognized that offers too good to be true usually were. But she was 23, and ambitious, and tired of working for head chefs who took credit for her ideas. "Let me think about it," she said. "Take your time." Austin turned to leave, then paused. "What's your name?" "Julie Carter." "Well, Julie Carter, I hope you call. The world deserves to eat your food." Then he was gone, back through the swinging doors into the gala, leaving Julie standing at her station with his business card in her hand and possibility humming in her chest. The head chef appeared at her elbow. "Did Austin Reed just offer you a job?" "Maybe." The chef snorted. "Take it. Men like that don't make offers twice." Julie looked at the card again. Embossed lettering, heavy paper stock, a phone number with a Chicago area code. She called him the next morning. 3 days later, she was Austin Reed's personal chef, working out of his penthouse kitchen in the Gold Coast, cooking meals that cost more per plate than she used to make in a week. And for the first year, it was exactly what he'd promised. Austin was a thoughtful employer. He asked about her family, her dreams, her opinions on everything from immigration policy to whether consciousness could be replicated in artificial intelligence. He gave her creative freedom in the kitchen and genuine appreciation when she delivered something extraordinary. They would eat together most nights, Austin asking her to sit down and explain the dishes she'd created. Julie would describe the techniques, the flavor profiles, the inspiration behind each element. Austin would listen with real interest, asking questions that proved he was actually paying attention. Somewhere in those late-night conversations over braised short ribs and deconstructed tiramisu, something shifted. Julie found herself dressing a little nicer for work, laughing a little harder at Austin's jokes, staying a little longer after dinner was finished. And Austin started looking at her differently, not like an employee, like a woman. The first kiss happened on Austin's 31st birthday. Julie had spent all day preparing a tasting menu of his favorite foods, 7 courses, each one a callback to something he'd mentioned loving as a child. Lobster rolls like the ones from a shack in Maine where his family used to vacation, tomato soup with grilled cheese made with the exact type of bread his grandmother used, strawberry shortcake with real whipped cream. Austin had been touched in a way Julie had never seen him touched by anything. His usual polish had cracked, revealing something vulnerable underneath. "This is the most thoughtful thing anyone's ever done for me," he said quietly. They were standing in the kitchen. Dishes were piled in the sink. Candles Julie had lit for ambiance were burning low. "Happy birthday, Austin." He looked at her for a long moment, and Julie felt the air change, felt the shift, from professional to personal, felt the moment stretching into possibility. "Can I kiss you?" Austin asked. Julie knew it was a bad idea, knew that workplace romances were complicated, knew that he was her employer and she was his employee, and power dynamics mattered. But she said yes anyway. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, like they were both testing whether this was real or just a moment of birthday sentimentality that would evaporate by morning. It didn't evaporate. 3 months later, Austin asked Julie to move in. 6 months after that, he told her he loved her. And 3 years after that birthday kiss, Austin took Julie to Santorini, to a beach with black sand, and water so blue it hurt to look at, and asked her to marry him with a ring that cost more than her entire culinary school tuition. Julie had cried and said yes and called Alice Morgan immediately because that's what you did when the best thing in your life happened. You called your best friend. And Alice had said all the right things. "Oh my God, Jules, I'm so happy for you. He's perfect. You're perfect together. Don't let him go." But if Julie had been paying closer attention, if she hadn't been so high on happiness and champagne, the golden light of a Greek sunset, she might have heard something else underneath Alice's congratulations, something that sounded almost like envy. Alice Morgan had been Julie's best friend since their first day at Kendall College's culinary program. They'd been assigned as roommates in the student housing, 2 girls from different worlds thrown together by alphabetical chance. Julie was from a working-class family in Indiana. Her father had been a high school teacher. Her mother worked as a nurse. They'd saved for years to help Julie pursue her culinary dreams, and even then, she'd needed loans and scholarships, and 2 part-time jobs to make it work. Alice was from money, old Chicago money, the kind that came with a hyphenated last name in a trust fund, and expectations about which country clubs you belonged to. But Alice had no interest in the debutante life her parents had planned. She wanted to be an artist, a creator, someone known for her talent rather than her family tree. Culinary school had seemed like rebellion, but Alice wasn't built for the discipline it required. She hated the early mornings and the burned fingers and the relentless criticism from instructors who didn't care about her last name. She hated that talent mattered more than pedigree, that you couldn't buy your way to a perfect production sauce. 6 months into the program, Alice dropped out. Julie had been devastated. "You can't quit. You're so talented." Alice had laughed bitterly. "I'm adequate. You're talented. There's a difference. So, what are you going to do?" "I don't know. Modeling, maybe. Or acting. Something where being pretty matters more than being skilled." And that's what Alice did for the next 5 years. She bounced from modeling gigs that never quite took off to acting classes that led nowhere, to influencer attempts that got a few thousand followers but never went viral. She dated men who promised her the world and delivered disappointment. She lived off her trust fund and pretended she was happy with her bohemian lifestyle. But Julie could see the truth. Alice was miserable. And as Julie's life got better, stable job, loving boyfriend, financial security, Alice's misery deepened. But they stayed friends, best friends, sisters. They had girls' nights every Thursday. They texted daily. They showed up for each other's birthdays and bad breakups and family emergencies. When Julie's father died suddenly of a heart attack during her second year with Austin, Alice had been the one who held her while she sobbed, who helped her plan the funeral, who stayed up with her through the long nights of grief when sleep felt impossible. That kind of thing bonds you. That kind of support makes you believe the friendship is unbreakable. So when Austin proposed and Julie started planning the wedding, it was obvious that Alice would be the maid of honor. Who else would it be? Alice had seemed honored, thrilled. She'd thrown herself into wedding planning with enthusiasm that felt genuine. She'd helped Julie try on dresses at 7 different boutiques before finding the Vera Wang gown that made Julie cry. She'd taste-tested cakes and argued with florists and created a spreadsheet for seating charts that was genuinely impressive. From the outside, Alice Morgan looked like the perfect best friend. But underneath that perfect surface, something dark was growing, because every time Alice helped Julie plan her fairy tale wedding to a billionaire, Alice was confronted with the arithmetic of her own failure. Julie, who came from nothing, had everything. Alice, who came from everything, had nothing that mattered. And somewhere in that toxic comparison, Alice stopped being Julie's friend and became her enemy. She just hid it really well. Austin introduced Julie to Seth Bailey 6 months into their relationship. They met at a restaurant in River North, one of those places with exposed brick and Edison bulbs and a wait list longer than the actual menu. Austin had insisted on celebrating the launch of a new product, and he wanted his 2 favorite people there, his girlfriend and his best friend. Seth arrived exactly on time, which Julie would later learn was characteristic. He was the same height as Austin, but carried himself differently. Where Austin demanded attention when he entered a room, Seth seemed content to occupy space quietly. He wore jeans and a button-down shirt, nice but not trying too hard. His handshake was firm without being aggressive. His smile reached his eyes. "You must be Julie," Seth said. "Austin hasn't shut up about you for 6 months." Julie laughed. "Hopefully good things. Exclusively. Although he did mention you have strong opinions about cilantro. It tastes like soap to some people. It's a genetic thing." Seth grinned. "I'm on your side. Cilantro is divisive, and we should treat it as such." They sat down, ordered drinks, and fell into easy conversation. Austin dominated most of it, talking about the product launch, the challenges they'd overcome, the market response they were hoping for. But every so often, Julie would catch Seth watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not creepy, not inappropriate, just attentive in a way that felt different from how most people looked at her. Seth and Austin had been roommates at MIT, randomly assigned freshman year, and had bonded over late-night coding sessions and a shared vision for what technology could become. They'd started Reed Bailey Technologies in their dorm room, Austin handling the vision and sales, Seth handling the actual engineering and operations. They were the classic partnership, the face and the brains, the dreamer and the builder, and they'd built something extraordinary. By the time Julie met Seth, Reed Bailey was valued at over $1 billion. They employed 300 people. They had contracts with Fortune 500 companies and government agencies. They were changing the world, or at least, that's what the press releases said. But despite the success and the wealth and the power, Seth Bailey remained remarkably normal. He lived in a modest apartment in Wicker Park, not a penthouse. He drove a Honda, not a Tesla. He wore jeans and t-shirts to the office, while Austin wore custom suits. Julie liked him immediately. Over the next 2 years, the three of them fell into a rhythm. Dinners once a month, occasional double dates when Seth was seeing someone, though those relationships never seemed to last long. Holiday parties, company events where Julie would accompany Austin and end up in conversations with Seth about everything from food science to philosophy. Seth remembered small details about Julie that even Austin sometimes forgot. He remembered she was allergic to shellfish and would quietly alert waiters when they went out. He remembered she took her coffee black with 1 sugar and would have it ready when she arrived at company events. He remembered she loved old movies, especially anything with Katharine Hepburn, and would text her when TCM was showing one. Julie thought he was just a thoughtful friend. She had no idea that Seth Bailey had fallen in love with her the moment they met, and had spent 2 years perfecting the art of hiding it. Because Seth understood something fundamental about loyalty and love. Austin was his best friend, his business partner, his brother in everything but blood. You didn't betray that for a woman, no matter how she made you feel like the world had suddenly shifted into Technicolor when it had been black and white your entire life. So Seth buried it. He dated other women and pretended they were enough. He showed up for Austin and Julie's relationship milestones with genuine smiles and appropriate gifts. He agreed to be the best man without hesitation, and he perfected the art of looking away when Julie entered a room, because looking directly at her felt like staring at the sun, beautiful and impossible, and something that would blind you if you weren't careful. But Seth saw things that Julie didn't see. He saw the way Austin took her for granted, the way Austin would cancel dates for meetings that weren't actually that important, the way Austin would forget to ask about her day, her dreams, her life beyond the meals she cooked for him. He saw the way Austin's eyes would wander when attractive women were around, the way Austin would take calls during dinner and step away for 20 minutes, coming back with explanations that sounded plausible but felt hollow. And about 9 months before the wedding, Seth started seeing something else. Text messages on Austin's phone when they were working late. The name Alice popping up more frequently than seemed normal for his fiancé's best friend. Austin taking calls and leaving the room. Austin lying about where he'd been. Seth had confronted him 6 months before the wedding, in Austin's office after everyone else had gone home. "Are you sleeping with Alice?" Austin had looked up from his laptop, his face showing genuine surprise. "What?" "Alice. Julie's best friend. Your future wife's maid of honor. Are you sleeping with her?" "That's a hell of an accusation, Seth." "It's not an accusation. It's a question." Austin closed his laptop slowly. "Why would you even ask that?" "Because you're acting exactly like you did when you cheated on Rachel. And Michelle. And that woman from the conference in Austin. I know the pattern. This is different, so you are sleeping with her." Austin stood up, pacing to the window. "It's complicated. It's actually very simple." Seth's voice was quiet but hard. "You're engaged to an incredible woman who loves you, and you're throwing that away for what? Her best friend? Are you insane? You don't understand. Then explain it to me." Austin was silent for a long moment. "Alice understands what it's like. The pressure. The expectations. Julie is perfect and good, and she makes me want to be better. But Alice doesn't expect me to be better. She takes me as I am." Seth felt something cold settle in his chest. "So end it with Julie. Don't marry her if you're going to keep doing this. I love Julie. Then act like it." Austin turned from the window. "You going to tell her?" Seth had stood there, facing the impossible choice between loyalty to his friend and protection of the woman he secretly loved. "End it with Alice." Seth had said finally. End it now. Get your shit together before the wedding. Because if you don't, I will tell her. Austin had nodded. Okay, you're right. I'll end it. But he hadn't ended it. He'd just gotten better at hiding it. And Seth, believing his friend's promise, had stayed silent. A decision he would regret for the rest of his life. Julie missed the red flags because you don't look for betrayal in the faces of people you trust. But looking back later, after everything burned down, she could map the warning signs like a disease progression. Each symptom obvious in hindsight. Each moment screaming danger that she'd dismissed as nothing. 9 months before the wedding, the engagement party at Austin's penthouse. 200 guests celebrating the happy couple. Champagne flowing. A string quartet playing. Julie in a gold dress that Austin had bought her, circulating through. The crowd, accepting congratulations from people she barely knew. She'd been talking to one of Austin's investors when she realized she hadn't seen Alice in a while. Julie excused herself and went looking, checking the bathroom first, then the guest rooms, finally stepping out onto the balcony. Alice and Austin were out there, just the two of them, standing close. Alice was fixing her lipstick using her phone camera. Austin was leaning against the railing, his bow tie loosened. They both turned when Julie stepped outside, and for just a fraction of a second, something flashed across both their faces. Something that might have been guilt. But then Alice smiled and rushed over to hug Julie. There you are. I was just getting some air. It's so hot in there. Austin nodded. I was keeping her company, making sure she didn't fall over the railing. They'd both laughed, and Julie had laughed too, pushing away the tiny whisper of unease in her gut. This was Alice, her sister, her best friend. Why would she suspect her of anything? 6 months before the wedding. Alice had started spending a lot of time at Austin's office. She'd volunteered to help with wedding-related errands, picking up Austin's custom tuxedo, dropping off payments to vendors, handling the little details that Julie was too busy to manage while running her increasingly successful private chef business. Julie had been grateful. You're a lifesaver, she'd told Alice over coffee one Thursday. That's what sisters are for, Alice had replied. But Julie had noticed that Alice seemed to know a lot about Austin's schedule. She'd mentioned meetings Austin hadn't told Julie about. She'd reference conversations they'd had. She'd have inside jokes that Julie wasn't part of. When Julie mentioned it to Austin, he'd brushed it off. She's just being helpful. You know Alice, she's a social butterfly. She probably knows my assistant's schedule better than I do. And that had made sense. That had been plausible. So Julie had accepted it. 4 months before the wedding. Julie had borrowed Austin's car to run errands while hers was in the shop. She'd been cleaning out the cup holders, finding the usual debris of Austin's life. Coffee cups, receipts, loose change, and an earring. Gold hoops. Distinctive. Expensive looking. Julie had stared at it for a long moment, her heart doing something strange in her chest. Then Alice had called, coincidentally, and Julie had mentioned finding the earring. Oh God, that's mine, Alice had said immediately. Remember last week when I borrowed Austin's car to pick up the tuxedo? My earring must have fallen off. I've been looking for it everywhere. Can you bring it Thursday? Julie had brought it. Alice had seemed genuinely relieved, and the explanation had made perfect sense. Except later, much later, Julie would remember that Alice had never borrowed Austin's car, that Alice had her own car, that the timeline didn't actually work, but in the moment, Julie had accepted the explanation because suspecting the truth was unthinkable. 2 months before the wedding, Austin had started canceling dates, emergency meetings with investors, last-minute fires at the office, a trip to San Francisco that got extended by 3 days. Julie had been disappointed, but understanding. She knew what it meant to date someone building an empire. Sacrifices came with the territory, but she'd noticed that Alice was often unavailable on the same nights. Last-minute audition, emergency with her sister, not feeling well. One Thursday, their standing girls' night, both Alice and Austin had canceled within an hour of each other. Julie had stayed home alone, ordering takeout, watching Pride and Prejudice for the 100th time, never once connecting that their separate excuses might lead to the same place. Because you don't think that way about people you love. You give them the benefit of the doubt. You trust. 1 month before the wedding, Julie had tried to surprise Austin at his office with dinner. She'd made his favorite, short rib ragout with pappardelle, and brought it, in thermal containers, planning to eat with him while he worked late. The office had been dark, but Austin's car was in the parking garage. Julie had called him. He'd answered on the 4th ring, slightly breathless. "Hey, babe, what's up? I'm at your office. Brought dinner." There'd been a pause, just a beat too long. "I'm not there. I left a few hours ago. Went for a run. I'm almost home, but your car is here." "Oh, yeah." Seth borrowed it. His is in the shop. Julie had stood in that parking garage, holding containers of food, staring at Austin's Mercedes. Something felt wrong, but she'd pushed the feeling away. Later that evening, she'd mentioned it to Seth at a company function. "Thanks for lending me your car," Seth had said, confused. "Austin said you borrowed his." Seth had gotten very quiet. Then he'd smiled tightly. "Right, yeah, thanks." And Julie had known, on some level, that Seth was covering for Austin. But she hadn't wanted to know why. 2 weeks before the wedding, Seth had shown up at Julie's apartment unannounced. She'd been surprised. Seth never dropped by without calling first. He'd looked uncomfortable, nervous, like he was carrying something heavy. "Is everything okay?" Julie had asked. "I need to tell you something about Austin." Julie's heart had started beating faster. "Okay." Seth had opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Then Austin had called. Julie had answered without thinking. "Hey." Austin's voice had been warm, casual. "Just wanted to see what you're doing. Miss you. I'm actually with Seth. He just stopped by." There'd been a pause. "Put him on?" Julie had handed the phone to Seth, watching his face go from determined to frustrated as Austin spoke. "Yeah, no, I know." Seth had handed the phone back. Austin had asked Julie something about the rehearsal dinner, a detail that needed clarifying. Keeping her on the phone for 10 minutes while Seth stood there, the moment evaporating. When Julie finally hung up, Seth's face had changed. The determination was gone. "Never mind," he'd said. "It's not important." "You sure?" "Yeah, just wedding jitters. Everyone gets them." And Seth had left, leaving Julie standing in her doorway, wondering what he'd been about to say. She would wonder about it a lot in the weeks that followed. The night before the wedding, Julie and Alice had gotten manicures. It was tradition. They'd been doing it before every big event since college. Girls' night before exams, mani-pedis before graduation. This ritual felt sacred. They sat in massage chairs that kneaded their backs while technicians painted their nails. Julie's in pale pink, Alice's in deep red. "Are you nervous?" Alice had asked. Excited nervous, not scared nervous. No doubts. Julie had looked at her best friend, searching her face for the reason behind the question. None. "Why? Should I have doubts?" Alice had smiled, but there was something hard in it. Something Julie would replay 1,000 times later, trying to decode. "No doubts," Alice had said. "Austin is perfect. You're perfect together. This is going to be the wedding of the century." She'd squeezed Julie's hand, and Julie had squeezed back, trusting completely. That night, lying in bed, unable to sleep from excitement and anticipation, Julie had allowed herself to imagine tomorrow. Walking down the aisle, saying vows, Austin sliding the ring onto her finger. Their first kiss as husband and wife, the reception, the dancing, the beginning of forever. She'd imagined it all. What she hadn't imagined was Alice standing up and destroying everything. What she hadn't imagined was that the two people she trusted most had been lying to her for 6 months. What she hadn't imagined was that tomorrow, instead of becoming a wife, she would become a cautionary tale. But imagination is limited by what you believe is possible. And Julie had believed that love and friendship were sacred. She'd believed that the people you trust wouldn't destroy you. She'd believed wrong. Family, I need to pause here for a moment, because I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking Julie should have seen it coming. You're thinking the signs were obvious. You're thinking she was naive or stupid or willfully blind. But Here's what I need you to understand. When you love people, you interpret their actions through the lens of that love. You give them the benefit of the doubt. You believe the explanations they give you because suspecting them feels like betraying the relationship. Julie wasn't stupid. She was trusting. And there's a difference. Trust is what allows us to build relationships, to create families, to function in community. Without trust, we're just isolated individuals protecting ourselves from connection. But trust also makes us vulnerable. And some people see that vulnerability as opportunity. They see your open heart and think target. They see your loyalty and think weakness. They see your love and think, how can I use this? Alice Morgan was one of those people, and so was Austin Reed. Now, if you're still with me, if this story is gripping your heart the way I intended, I need you to do something. Hit that like button right now. Comment where you're watching from, or just type, I'm with you, Mr. Hearthline. And if you haven't already subscribed, subscribe now, because what happens next is going to show you what grace looks like when it refuses to break. The wedding day started with champagne and sunshine. Julie woke up at 6 in the morning in the bridal suite at the Sinclair Hotel. The same hotel where she'd met Austin 6 years earlier. The same ballroom where he'd wandered into her kitchen and changed her life. It felt full circle. It felt perfect. Her mother was already awake, sitting by the window with coffee, looking at the Chicago skyline with tears in her eyes. Your father should be here, she said quietly. He is, Julie replied. He wouldn't miss this. They'd held each other for a moment, grief and joy mixing the way they always did at major life events. Julie's father had died 4 years earlier, sudden and shocking, a heart attack at 56. He'd never met Austin, never seen Julie's success as a chef, never got to walk her down the aisle. His absence was a presence, heavy and bittersweet. But life moves forward, even through grief. The bridal suite filled up quickly. Julie's mother, her 2 cousins, 3 friends from culinary school, and Alice, maid of honor, arriving with coffee and pastries and enough energy for everyone. Today is the day, Alice had announced, hugging Julie tightly. You're getting married. Julie had hugged her back, breathing in Alice's familiar perfume, feeling grateful for this friendship that had survived everything. College stress, career ups and downs, family tragedies, 6 years of sisterhood. I couldn't do this without you, Julie had said, and Alice had smiled and said, I know. The morning became a blur of activity. Hair and makeup artists arriving, the photographer documenting every moment, mimosas poured, laughter filling the suite. Julie sat in the makeup chair while a woman named Simone did her face, and Alice sat beside her, getting her own makeup done, and they talked about everything and nothing. Remember freshman year? Alice said, when we had no money and would split ramen packets for dinner? And you would add fancy ingredients to make it gourmet. Truffle oil and a poached egg can make anything fancy. They laughed. Look at you now, Alice had said, marrying a billionaire, living the dream. I'm marrying Austin because I love him. The money doesn't matter. Alice had looked at her in the mirror, her expression unreadable. Of course, love, that's what matters. By 11, Julie was in her dress. The Vera Wang gown was a masterpiece, ivory silk that flowed like water, a bodice that fit perfectly, a train that extended 6 feet, delicate beading that caught the light and made her look like she was wearing starlight. Julie's mother cried when she saw her. The photographer cried. Even the makeup artist teared up. You look like a princess, Alice said. And in that moment, Julie felt like one. Across the hotel, in the groom's suite, Austin Reed was having a very different morning. He'd woken up hungover from the bachelor party, his head pounding, his mouth tasting like regret and expensive whiskey. Seth had been there already, sitting in a chair by the window, drinking coffee, watching Austin with an expression that Austin couldn't quite read. Big day, Seth had said. Biggest of my life. You ready? Austin had looked at his best friend, at the man who knew him better than anyone, at the one person who could probably see through his bullshit. Yeah, I'm ready. But Seth's expression hadn't changed. The groomsmen arrived. Austin's brother, his college roommate, 2 guys from work, The energy was loud, masculine, full of the kind of jokes men make when they're uncomfortable with actual emotion. They drank more. They laughed. They took photos that would end up on Instagram with captions about brotherhood and loyalty. But Seth stayed quiet. At one point, Austin found him alone in the bathroom. "You've been weird all morning. What's going on?" Seth had looked at him in the mirror. "Last chance, Austin." Last chance for what? To do the right thing. Austin had felt something twist in his gut. "I am doing the right thing. I'm marrying Julie." "Are you? Or are you marrying the image of yourself that loving Julie creates?" "That's deep for a Saturday morning." "I'm serious." Seth turned to face him. "If you're not all in on this, if there's any part of you that's going to keep doing what you've been doing, you need to stop this wedding right now." Austin had wanted to confess, wanted to admit that he'd kept seeing Alice, that he'd promised to end it but hadn't, that he was planning to end it after the wedding, after the honeymoon, once things settled down. But confessing would mean losing everything. So he'd lied. "I'm all in. I love Julie. Everything else is done. Finished." Seth had studied his face for a long moment. Then he'd nodded. "Okay, I believe you." But his eyes said he didn't. The ceremony was scheduled for 3 in the afternoon. By 2, the ballroom was full. 300 guests in formal wear. The string quartet playing pachelbel, white orchids everywhere, cascading from the ceiling, lining the aisle, covering the altar in fragrant abundance. It was a $2 million wedding. Every detail perfect, every moment orchestrated for maximum beauty. The groom's party entered first. Austin's brother, the college friend, the work colleagues, and finally Seth, walking down the aisle to stand beside Austin at the altar. Seth in his tuxedo, his face carefully neutral, taking his position as best man in a wedding he'd tried to stop. Then the bridesmaids, Julie's cousins, her culinary school friends, and finally Alice, maid of honor, in a deep burgundy dress that made her look stunning. She walked down the aisle with a smile that everyone would later remember looked slightly wrong. Too wide, too fixed. She took her position across from Seth, and they made eye contact for just a second. Seth's eyes said, "Don't do this." Alice's eyes said, "Watch me." But Seth misunderstood what she was planning. The music changed. Pachelbel's cannon swelled. Everyone stood, and Julie appeared at the entrance to the ballroom. She looked breathtaking. The photographer would later say it was the most beautiful bride he'd ever shot. Julie's mother, walking her down the aisle since her father couldn't, was crying so hard she could barely see. Julie walked slowly, taking in the moment. The flowers, the guests, the music, Austin at the altar, looking handsome and nervous, and exactly like the man she'd fallen in love with 6 years ago. Everything was perfect. Everything was finally, beautifully perfect. She reached the altar. Her mother kissed her cheek and took her seat in the front row. Austin took Julie's hands. He was smiling, but Julie noticed his palms were sweating. "Nervous?" she whispered. Terrified, he whispered back. They both smiled. The officiant began. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Julie Carter and Austin Reed in holy matrimony. Marriage is a sacred covenant, a bond that joins not just 2 individuals, but 2 families, 2 futures, 2 souls." The guests were silent, reverent. The officiant continued through the traditional language, the promises and vows that countless couples had spoken before, the words that were supposed to mean forever. "Austin and Julie have chosen to write their own vows," the officiant said. "But before we get to that beautiful part of the ceremony, I must ask if anyone has objections to this union. So I say now, if anyone has any reason why these 2 should not be joined in marriage, speak now or forever hold your peace." Silence. 300 people holding their breath. This was the formality, the moment that existed only for legal reasons. No one actually objected at weddings. That was movie stuff, drama for entertainment. This was real life. In real life, everyone stayed quiet. Except Alice didn't. Alice stood up slowly, her burgundy dress rustling in the quiet. Everyone turned to look. Julie's first thought was that something was wrong, that Alice was sick, that she needed to leave. But then Alice spoke. I do. I object. The ballroom seemed to hold its collective breath. The officiant looked confused. I'm sorry, what? I object to this marriage. Julie still didn't understand. Alice, what are you doing? Alice looked at her, and Julie saw something in her best friend's face she'd never seen before. Hatred. Pure, undiluted hatred. I'm saving you from a mistake, Alice said. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that Austin doesn't love you. Not the way you think. Not the way you deserve. Austin stepped forward. Alice, stop. This isn't the time or place. No? Alice laughed, and it sounded slightly unhinged. When is the time, Austin? When is the place? After the wedding? After the honeymoon? After another 6 months of lying? Julie felt the floor shifting beneath her. 6 months? Alice turned to the crowd, to 300 pairs of eyes now locked on her, and spoke clearly. I object to this marriage because Austin Reed has been sleeping with me. For 6 months, since the engagement party, in his penthouse, in his office. In the car, Julie found my earring in. The ballroom exploded. People gasped. Someone screamed. Phones came out. The photographer's camera clicked rapid fire, capturing Julie's face as it cycled through confusion, understanding, devastation. Julie stood perfectly still, her bouquet trembling slightly in her hands. She looked at Austin. His face had gone white. He opened his mouth. No words came out. She looked at Alice. Alice was smiling now, tears running down her face, but smiling. And Julie understood. This wasn't a confession born of guilt. This was a confession born of jealousy. Alice hadn't told the truth to save Julie. She'd told it to destroy her. Julie Carter stood at that altar, in her $200,000 dress, holding her bouquet of white peonies, and felt everything inside her go very quiet. Not numb. Quiet. Like the moment before a storm, when the air pressure changes and the world holds its breath. She looked at Austin, really looked at him, and watched him try to form words that could somehow rearrange reality into something survivable. Julie, I can explain. This isn't what it sounds like. She's lying. She's obsessed. I never touched her. Please, you have to believe me. But his face told a different story. Guilt was written in every line, every expression, every micro-movement of his features. Julie turned to Alice, her best friend, her sister, the woman who'd held her through her father's death, the woman who'd helped her pick this dress, the woman who'd promised 1,000 times that they'd always have each other's backs. Why? Julie's voice was quiet, but it carried through the silent ballroom. Why would you do this? Alice's smile widened, tears still streaming down her face. Because I love him, and he loves me. Not you. Me. That's not true, Austin said desperately. Julie, she's delusional. I don't love her. I love you. Only you. Julie looked between them, watching them both lie in different ways. Alice lying to herself about Austin's feelings, Austin lying to Julie about his actions. And suddenly, Julie understood everything with perfect clarity. Neither of them loved her. Austin loved the idea of her. The perfect wife, the talented chef, the woman who made him look good at dinner parties and never demanded too much. Alice loved what Julie had. The success, the stability, the fairy tale. She didn't want Austin. She wanted Julie's life. And Julie was done giving either of them anything. She turned to face the 300 guests who were recording this, uploading it, making her devastation into entertainment that would trend before the reception dinner was supposed to start. Julie lifted her chin. Her voice, when she spoke, was steady, clear, each word chosen carefully. There won't be a wedding today. Austin reached for her. Julie, please, we can work through this. Don't throw away 6 years because of one mistake. Julie stepped back, smooth and deliberate. One mistake would be a drunken kiss. One mistake would be a moment of weakness you immediately regretted. 6 months of sleeping with my best friend while planning our wedding isn't a mistake, Austin. It's a choice. And now, I'm making mine. She handed her bouquet to the flower girl, the confused 6-year-old, in Tool who didn't understand what was happening but knew it was bad. Julie knelt down, eye level with the child, and kissed her forehead gently. "You did such a good job, sweetheart. Thank you." Then she stood and turned to her mother in the front row. "I love you, Mom." Her mother was crying, nodding, trying to stand, but Julie was already moving, walking back down the aisle, not running, not fleeing, walking with her spine straight and her head high and her wedding dress rustling, like whispers of judgment from 300 people who couldn't look away. And that's when Seth Bailey made his choice. He'd stood beside Austin for 15 years, through college, through building a company, through every relationship and breakup and moment that defined Austin's life. But watching Julie walk down that aisle alone, Seth understood that some loyalties expired when they became complicit in cruelty. He left his position at the altar, walked away from his best friend without a word, fell into step beside Julie. He didn't touch her, didn't speak, just walked beside her as silent support through a ballroom that had erupted into chaos behind them. People were shouting. Alice was crying. Austin was yelling something. The photographer's camera was clicking. Phones were out everywhere, but Seth blocked it all out. He focused on matching Julie's pace, on being present without being intrusive, on making sure she didn't have to walk through this nightmare alone. They reached the ballroom doors, stepped through into the marble lobby. The hotel staff were staring, having heard the commotion but not understanding what happened. Julie kept walking toward the exit. Seth kept pace beside her. They were almost to the front doors when Julie's legs gave out. Not dramatically, just her knees buckling slightly, her hand reaching out for balance. Seth caught her elbow gently. "I've got you." Julie looked at him, and Seth saw the exact moment the shock wore off and the pain rushed in. Her face crumpled. "I need to leave," she whispered. "I need to disappear. Then that's what we'll do." Seth guided her to a side entrance, away from the main doors where wedding guests would be flooding out any second. He pulled out his phone and called his driver. "Marcus, I need you at the Sinclair. Side entrance on Wabash. 2 minutes." The driver didn't ask questions. Seth removed his tuxedo jacket and draped it over Julie's shoulders, covering the wedding dress that was making hotel staff stare. They waited in silence. Julie was shaking now, her whole body trembling like she was freezing even though it was 70 degrees. Seth wanted to say something comforting, something that would make this better, but there were no words that could do that. So he just stood beside her and waited. The car arrived. Seth opened the door, helped Julie in, slid in beside her. "Where to?" Marcus asked. Seth gave him the address of his second apartment, the one in Lincoln Park that Austin didn't know about. The one Seth kept as a backup, as a private space, as somewhere that was just his. They drove through Chicago in silence. Julie stared out the window, not crying, just staring. Seth watched her and felt something in his chest break for her. This was the woman he'd loved for 6 years, the woman he'd watched from a distance, the woman he'd dreamed about in ways he'd never allowed himself to acknowledge fully. And she'd just had her heart publicly shattered by his best friend, ex-best friend. Seth corrected himself, because whatever he and Austin had been, it ended the moment Alice stood up. Actually, it had ended 6 months ago when Austin started sleeping with her and Seth had stayed silent. That silence was Seth's betrayal, and he was going to spend however long it took making up for it. They arrived at the apartment building. Seth helped Julie out of the car, guided her through the lobby where the doorman knew better than to comment on the woman in a wedding dress and tuxedo jacket, up the elevator to the 15th floor. His apartment was quiet, clean, sparse in the way of someone who didn't spend much time at home. Julie stood in the middle of the living room, still trembling, looking lost. "What do you need?" Seth asked quietly. Julie looked at him with eyes that were starting to flood with tears she'd been holding back. "I don't know. I don't know what I need. I don't know what to do. I don't know anything anymore." "Then, let's start with right now." "This moment. What would help right now?" "I want out of this dress." "Okay, bathroom is through there. I'll find you something to wear." Seth went to his bedroom, pulled out sweatpants and a t-shirt, brought them to the bathroom door. Julie emerged 20 minutes later. She'd washed off her makeup, taken down her hair, put on his clothes that were too big, the sweatpants rolled at the waist, the t-shirt hanging off one shoulder. She looked young and broken, and nothing like the radiant bride from an hour ago. She walked to Seth's couch and sat down. And then she started crying. Not delicate tears, gut-wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. The kind of crying that came from somewhere deep and primal and couldn't be controlled. Seth sat down beside her. He didn't try to stop her. Didn't tell her it would be okay. Didn't offer empty platitudes. He just sat there. And when Julie turned into him, burying her face in his shoulder, Seth wrapped his arms around her and held her while she broke apart. She cried for an hour. Seth held her the entire time. When the sobs finally subsided into hiccups and shaky breathing, Julie pulled back slightly. "I'm sorry. I got your shirt all wet. I don't care about the shirt." Julie looked at him, really looked at him, for maybe the first time. "Why did you leave? Why did you walk out with me?" "Because watching you walk alone felt wrong. But Austin is your best friend. Your business partner. You built everything together." Seth was quiet for a moment. Then he said something he'd never said out loud before. 6 months ago, I knew. I suspected what he was doing, and I confronted him. He promised to end it. He looked me in the eye and promised. And I believed him because that's what you do with people you trust. You believe them. Julie's eyes widened. "You knew?" "I suspected. I didn't have proof. And when Austin promised it was over, I chose to believe him instead of warning you." Seth's voice cracked slightly. "That was my mistake. My betrayal. I should have told you anyway. I should have stopped that wedding before it started." "Why didn't you?" "Because I'm a coward." The words hung between them. "You're not a coward," Julie said quietly. "You're here now. Now is too late." Julie shook her head. "Now is when it matters." They sat in silence for a while. Then Julie's phone started buzzing. She pulled it out of Seth's jacket pocket. The screen showed 47 missed calls. 23 from Austin. 15 from Alice. 9 from her mother. Texts were flooding in, hundreds of them. Julie scrolled through a few. "Austin, Julie, please call me. We need to talk. I love you. This is all a misunderstanding. Alice, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for it to happen like that. Please forgive me. You're my sister." Her mother. "Baby, where are you? Are you safe? Please let me know you're okay." Julie turned off her phone. "I can't deal with any of this right now. You don't have to." "What happens now?" Seth looked at this woman he'd loved from a distance for 6 years, sitting on his couch in his clothes with her heart in pieces, and made a decision. "Now we figure out what comes next. One day at a time. 1 hour at a time, if that's all you can manage. I don't have anywhere to go. All my stuff is at Austin's penthouse. Then we'll get your stuff. Tomorrow. Or next week. Whenever you're ready. I can't stay here. I can't impose on you like that. You're not imposing. You're surviving. There's a difference." Julie's eyes filled with tears again. "Why are you being so nice to me?" Seth wanted to say, "Because I love you. Because I've loved you since the moment I met you. Because watching you in pain is the worst thing I've ever experienced, and I would do anything to make it stop." But this wasn't the time for confessions. So instead he said, "Because you deserve kindness. And because you're my friend, and friends show up." Julie nodded, fresh tears spilling over. "Thank you. You don't need to thank me." That night, Seth gave Julie his bedroom and took the couch. He lay there in the dark, listening to the sounds of her crying through the door, and hated Austin Reed with an intensity he'd never felt for anyone. Not because Austin had cheated, but because he'd cheated with Alice, Julie's best friend, the one person Julie trusted completely. That was calculated cruelty. That was destroying someone from the inside out. And Seth was done protecting Austin from consequences. Across the city, in the honeymoon suite at the Sinclair Hotel that Austin had booked for after the reception, Austin Reed sat on the bed with a bottle of scotch and tried to understand how everything had fallen apart so quickly. The wedding guests had scattered within 30 minutes of Julie's exit, some horrified, some fascinated, all of them recording and texting and calling friends to share the scandal. Austin's mother had slapped him across the face in front of everyone. His father had said, "You're a disgrace to this family." His brother had just shaken his head and walked out. And Alice had tried to approach him, tried to touch him, tried to play the role of girlfriend now that the secret was out. Austin had looked at her with pure hatred. "Get away from me." "But Austin, we can be together now. That's what you wanted, right?" "What I wanted," Austin had laughed, bitter and cruel. "I never wanted you, Alice. You were convenient. You were there. You threw yourself at me and I was weak enough to take what was offered. But I never loved you. I never even liked you." Alice's face had crumpled. "You said you loved me. I lied. People lie during sex. It doesn't mean anything. Then why did you keep sleeping with me for 6 months? Because you didn't expect anything from me. Because Julie is good and pure and she makes me want to be better. And sometimes I'm exhausted from trying to be better. Sometimes I just want to be the selfish asshole I actually am. You let me be that." Alice had started crying. "So I was what? A release valve? You were a mistake I kept making." And Alice had slapped him, hard enough that his head snapped to the side, hard enough that people had stared. Then she'd run out, leaving Austin standing in the ballroom that still smelled like white orchids and broken promises. Now, hours later, Austin sat alone. He'd tried calling Julie. She wasn't answering. He'd tried calling Seth. Voicemail. He'd even tried calling his mother. She'd hung up on him. So Austin drank and scrolled through his phone. Found photos of Julie. Julie cooking in his kitchen. Julie laughing at something he'd said. Julie asleep in his bed with morning light across her face. He'd had everything. Beautiful woman who loved him. Successful company. Respect. A future that looked golden. And he'd destroyed it for sex with someone he didn't even like. The realization hit him hard. He didn't love Alice. He loved Julie. And now, she was gone. Austin poured another drink and made a decision. He'd get her back. He'd apologize, beg, grovel, whatever it took. Julie loved him. 6 years together. That didn't just disappear because of one mistake. He'd make her understand. He'd make her forgive him. He had to, because the alternative was losing her forever, and Austin Reed wasn't built to lose. Alice Morgan went back to Austin's penthouse that night because she had nowhere else to go. Her own apartment was a studio in a bad neighborhood that she'd barely been living in because she'd been spending so much time at Austin's place, sneaking in when Julie wasn't there, playing house, pretending she was the girlfriend. She let herself in with the key Austin had given her months ago. The penthouse was dark and empty and felt nothing like the fantasy she'd imagined. Alice walked through rooms she'd imagined belonging to her. The master bedroom where she and Austin had sex while Julie was working. The kitchen where Alice had cooked breakfast for him, practicing being his wife. The balcony where they'd stood during the engagement party and first kissed. She'd thought confessing would lead to them being together. She'd thought Julie would leave and Austin would choose her. She'd thought destroying her best friend would somehow make her happy. But standing alone in Austin's penthouse, Alice felt only emptiness. Her phone was full of messages. Her mother, "What have you done? How could you humiliate this family?" Her sister, "Don't ever contact me again." Former friends, "You're disgusting." And Julie, radio silence from Julie, which somehow hurt more than anything else. Alice sat on Austin's couch and tried to figure out when she'd become this person. When had she stopped being Julie's friend and become her enemy? She could trace it back to culinary school, when Julie's talent had outshone hers. To every success Julie achieved that Alice couldn't match. To the engagement, when Julie got the fairy tale and Alice got another failed relationship. Somewhere in all that comparison, love had curdled into envy, and envy had festered into hatred, and hatred had manifested into betrayal. Alice had destroyed her best friend, for a man who just told her he never loved her, for a fantasy that was never real. She'd burned down the most important relationship in her life for absolutely nothing. Alice started crying, but unlike Julie's tears, which came from pain, Alice's came from shame. She knew what she'd done, and she knew She could never undo it. The first week after the wedding was the hardest. Julie barely left Seth's apartment. She slept most of the day, moving between bed and couch like a ghost. She couldn't eat, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except replay the wedding in her head on an endless loop. Alice standing up. "I've been sleeping with him." The look on Austin's face. Seth had taken the week off work, telling his assistant only that there was a family emergency. He stayed with Julie, not hovering, just present. He'd work from home on his laptop while Julie stared at the ceiling. He'd order food she mostly didn't eat. He'd sit in comfortable silence that didn't demand anything from her. On day 3, Julie finally spoke more than a few words. "I need to get my stuff from Austin's place." "Okay, I'll go with you." "No, I need to do this alone." Seth had wanted to argue, but he recognized the look on her face. This was something she needed to do for herself. "Take my car, and call me if you need me. I'll come get you immediately." Julie had driven to the penthouse at 2 in the afternoon when she knew Austin would be at work. She let herself in with her key. The place smelled the same, looked the same, but felt completely different. This had been her home for 3 years. Now it felt like a crime scene. Julie moved through the rooms mechanically, packing her things. Clothes from the closet, toiletries from the bathroom, books from the shelves, the stand mixer Austin had bought her for her birthday, the knife set that had been an anniversary gift. She was packing kitchen supplies when she heard the door open. Austin walked in, and they both froze. He looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, wearing yesterday's clothes. "Julie," he said, his voice raw. "I've been calling you. I know. Please, can we talk? Just 5 minutes. There's nothing to talk about." "Yes, there is." Austin moved closer. "I'm so sorry. What I did was unforgivable. I know that, but I love you. I've always loved you." Alice meant nothing. It was just physical. It didn't mean anything. Julie felt something cold settle in her chest. "It didn't mean anything," she repeated. 6 months of lying to me didn't mean anything. That's not what I meant. You slept with my best friend, Austin, in our bed, in this penthouse, while I was planning our wedding, while I was trusting you completely. I know I'm a terrible person. I'm weak. I made a horrible mistake. Stop calling it a mistake." Julie's voice was sharp. "Mistakes are accidental. This was a choice. You chose to betray me every single day for 6 months. I'll do anything to make this right. Therapy, couples counseling, whatever you need. What I need is to never see you again." Austin's face crumpled. "You don't mean that. I've never meant anything more in my life. Julie, please, we can work through this. People forgive affairs. People move past this. People forgive affairs when the person is actually sorry, when they come clean themselves, when they end it immediately. You didn't do any of that. You were going to marry me while still sleeping with her. I was going to end it after the wedding." Julie laughed, bitter and hollow. "Oh, well then, that makes it so much better. I love you." "No, you don't. You love the idea of me, the trophy wife who cooks and smiles and makes you look good. But you don't love me enough to be faithful. You don't love me enough to respect me. You don't even love me enough to tell me the truth." "That's not fair." Julie stepped closer, her voice deadly quiet. "You want to know what's not fair? I spent 6 years cooking your favorite meals, attending your boring work events, supporting your dreams, being the perfect girlfriend, and you repaid me by sleeping with the one person whose betrayal would hurt me most. That's what's not fair." Austin was crying now. "Please, I can't lose you. You already did." Julie picked up the last box of her things and walked toward the door. Austin grabbed her arm, not hard, just desperate. "Don't touch me," Julie said, her voice like ice. He let go immediately. Julie walked out of the penthouse, into the elevator, out of the building, and didn't look back. She made it to Seth's car before she started shaking. She called him. "Can you come get me? I can't drive." Seth was there in 12 minutes. He found Julie sitting in his car, crying so hard she couldn't breathe. He got in the driver's seat, started the engine, and drove her home without asking what happened. That night, Julie made a decision. She was done crying over Austin Reed. She was done grieving a relationship that hadn't been real. She was done letting his betrayal define her. Starting tomorrow, she was going to rebuild. Not because she was over it, but because staying broken would let Austin and Alice win. And Julie Carter hadn't survived her father's death in culinary school in 6 years, in a relationship with a man who didn't deserve her just to let them destroy her now. She was going to survive this too, and she was going to make sure they regretted what they'd done. Not through revenge, through success. Family, I need to pause here and tell you something important. What Julie did next is what separates people who survive betrayal from people who get destroyed by it. She didn't plot revenge. She didn't try to ruin Austin's reputation or expose Alice publicly or burn down their lives. She just decided to build her own life so well that their betrayal became irrelevant. That's power. That's grace. That's how you win when someone tries to break you. If you're watching this and you've been betrayed, I need you to hear this. The best revenge is building a life so beautiful that the people who hurt you can only watch from the sidelines and realize what they lost. Now hit that like button if you're ready to see Julie do exactly that. Comment "I'm with you, Mr. Hearthline," if you believe broken people can become unstoppable. And keep watching, because what happens next is going to make you believe in second chances. 3 weeks after the wedding disaster, Julie Carter went back to work. She'd been living in Seth's apartment, which they both knew couldn't be permanent, but neither was ready to address yet. Seth had been sleeping on the couch, giving Julie the bedroom, maintaining careful boundaries even though something between them was shifting. Julie had called her former clients, the ones she'd been cooking for before Austin, before the engagement had taken over her life. "Mrs. Patterson, I'm available again if you still need a personal chef." Mrs. Patterson, a wealthy widow on the North Shore, had been thrilled. "Julie, darling, I've been eating garbage since you left. When can you start?" "Tomorrow." So Julie started cooking again. She'd arrive at clients' homes early in the morning, prepare meals for the week, teach cooking classes to bored socialites, cater small dinner parties. The work was good, familiar. It required focus that left no room for thinking about Austin or Alice or the wedding that had turned into a nightmare. And Julie was good at it. Better than good. Her food had always been exceptional, but now there was something else in it. An intensity, an emotion, pain transformed into beauty on a plate. Her clients noticed. Mrs. Patterson told her friends. Those friends hired Julie. Word spread the way word spreads in wealthy circles, quietly but quickly. Within a month, Julie had more work than she could handle. She was cooking 6 days a week, sometimes 14-hour days, coming home to Seth's apartment exhausted but satisfied. Seth would be there, usually working on his laptop, and they'd fallen into a routine. "How was today?" he'd ask. "Good. Busy." Made a butternut squash risotto that made a billionaire cry. Emotional billionaire or good food billionaire? Good food billionaire. Seth would smile. "Of course you did." They'd eat dinner together, whatever Julie had brought home from work. They'd talk about their days. They'd watch old movies that Julie loved. They'd exist in this comfortable space that felt like friendship, but was quietly becoming something more. One evening, 2 months after the wedding, Julie came home to find Seth looking stressed. "What's wrong?" Seth closed his laptop. "Austin's been calling. Every day. Multiple times. He wants to talk about the company. Are you going to?" Seth was quiet for a moment. "I sold my stake." Julie's eyes widened. "What?" "I sold my 40% of Reed Bailey. The papers went through today. But you built that company. That's your life's work." Seth looked at her directly. "It was our life's work, mine and Austin's, but I can't work with him anymore. I can't look at him without seeing what he did to you. So I sold my shares, took my money, and walked away." Julie felt tears threatening. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did. For my own sanity, for my own integrity. I can't build something with someone I don't respect." Seth leaned forward. "And honestly, Julie, I'm relieved. I've been wanting to start something new for years, something that actually matters. Reed Bailey was about profit. I want to build something about purpose. What are you going to build? I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. Julie reached across the table and took his hand. Thank you. For what? For being here. For giving up your company. For making me feel like I'm not alone in this. Seth squeezed her hand. You're not alone. You're never going to be alone again. They held hands for a moment longer than necessary. Then Julie pulled away, scared of what she was feeling. Because falling for Seth felt like betraying herself. Falling for anyone felt impossible. But Seth Bailey was making it feel inevitable. 3 months after the wedding, Julie found an apartment in Brooklyn. It was small, a 1-bedroom in a neighborhood that was gentrifying but not quite there yet. It had exposed brick and old hardwood floors and a kitchen that was tiny but functional. It was perfect. Seth helped her move in on a Saturday, carrying boxes up 4 flights because the elevator was broken. They assembled furniture from IKEA, arguing good-naturedly about which piece went where, laughing when they built the bookshelf backward and had to start over. When everything was finally in place, they sat on Julie's new couch, eating pizza, looking at the apartment that was hers. Completely hers. How does it feel? Seth asked. Like freedom. Good. You deserve freedom. Julie looked at him. At this man who'd given up his company and his best friend and his comfortable life to stand beside her. At this man who'd slept on a couch for 2 months without complaint. At this man who'd somehow become the most important person in her world without her realizing it was happening. Seth, yeah? Why are you doing all this? Seth set down his pizza. I told you. You're my friend. Is that all I am? The question hung between them. Seth looked at her, and Julie saw something in his eyes she'd been pretending not to see for months. No, he said quietly. That's not all you are. Then what am I? Seth was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, You're the woman I've been in love with since the moment we met. You're the reason I couldn't make any relationship work because no one else was you. You're the person I think about first thing in the morning and last thing before I sleep. You're everything. Julie felt her heart stop. She'd known on some level that Seth had feelings for her, but hearing him say it out loud made it real, made it something she had to respond to. I can't, she whispered. I'm not ready. I just got out of a relationship that destroyed me. I can't jump into something new. I know. Seth's voice was steady. I'm not asking you to. I'm just being honest because you asked. I love you, Julie. I've loved you for 6 years, and I'll keep loving you whether we're together or not. But I'm not going to pressure you or push you or make you uncomfortable. I'm just going to be here for as long as you need. Tears spilled down Julie's face. That's not fair to you. Let me decide what's fair to me. What if I never feel the same way? Then, I'll still consider knowing you a privilege. Julie covered her face with her hands, overwhelmed. Seth moved closer, but didn't touch her. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said anything. No. Julie lowered her hands. I'm glad you did. I just don't know what to do with it. You don't have to do anything with it. Just let it exist. Let us exist, however we exist. Friends, roommates, whatever you're comfortable with. I don't want to lose you. You won't. Promise? Seth smiled. Promise. That night, after Seth left, Julie lay in her new bed in her new apartment and allowed herself to think about Seth Bailey. Not as Austin's friend, not as the man who'd helped her escape, but as Seth. Kind, patient, brilliant, funny in quiet ways, attractive in ways she'd trained herself not to notice. A man who'd loved her for 6 years and never once made it her problem. A man who'd walked away from everything to stand beside her. A man who looked at her like she was the sun. And Julie realized something terrifying. She was starting to fall for him too. 6 months after the wedding that never happened, Julie Carter opened her own restaurant. It started with a conversation. Seth had come over for dinner, which had become a weekly thing. Julie would cook. Seth would bring wine. They'd eat and talk and carefully maintain the friendship boundary, even though both of them could feel it straining. Tell me about your dream restaurant, Seth said one night. Julie had smiled. You don't want to hear about that. I absolutely want to hear about that. So Julie told him. Small, intimate, maybe 20 seats, 1 seating per night, a menu that changes daily based on what's fresh at the market, food that tells stories, an experience, not just a meal. Seth had listened with complete attention. What's stopping you? Money. Investors don't exactly line up for chefs with scandal attached to their name. What if I invested? Julie had laughed. Absolutely not. Why? Because you've already done too much. I'm not taking your money. It's not charity, Julie. It's an investment in talent I believe in. Seth, let me help you build something. Julie had wanted to say no. Independence felt safer than owing anyone. But Seth's eyes held something she recognized now. Not pity, not obligation. Belief. Real, genuine belief in her. What would the terms be? Whatever you want them to be. You have full creative control. I'm a silent partner. You pay me back from profits if and when you can. That's a terrible business arrangement. Seth had smiled. Good thing I'm not doing this for business reasons. They'd shaken on it. Within 3 months, Julie had found a space. A renovated brownstone in Brooklyn with enough room for a small dining area and a dream kitchen. She'd named it Julie's Table. Opening night was everything she'd imagined and nothing she'd expected. 20 guests, a tasting menu of 7 courses. Each dish a story, a memory, an emotion translated into food. The critics who came were blown away. Chef Julie Carter is a revelation, wrote the Tribune. Her food doesn't just feed you, it heals you. Best new restaurant in Chicago, declared the Sun-Times. Julie's Table is intimate, innovative, and absolutely essential. Reservations booked solid for 3 months within a week. Julie's Table became the restaurant everyone wanted to get into, and Julie became the chef everyone wanted to know. She'd rebuilt herself completely separate from Austin, on her own talent, through her own work. Seth had been there for opening night, sitting at the corner table, watching Julie command her kitchen like the artist she was. When the last guest left and the staff went home, Seth had stayed to help Julie clean. You did it, he said. We did it. No. Seth shook his head. This is all you. I just wrote a check. You created magic. Julie looked at him across the kitchen. I couldn't have done this without you. Yes, you could have. Just would have taken longer. They'd stood there, looking at each other, and Julie felt the friendship boundary finally completely dissolve. Seth, yeah? Can I kiss you? Seth went very still. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. Seth crossed the kitchen in 3 steps. He cupped Julie's face in his hands gently, giving her every chance to change her mind. She didn't. Their first kiss was soft, tentative, testing whether this was real or just a moment that would evaporate by morning. It felt like coming home. They pulled apart, foreheads touching. I love you, Julie whispered. Seth smiled. I know. Julie laughed, the first real laugh she'd had in months. Cocky, confident. There's a difference. Kiss me again. He did. And this time, there was nothing tentative about it. 9 months after that first kiss, Seth's startup got funded. He'd been working on it quietly, building a prototype for vertical farming technology that could revolutionize urban agriculture. Systems that could grow a month's worth of vegetables in closet-sized spaces using 90% less water. It was ambitious, risky, exactly the kind of moonshot that Seth loved. He'd pitched to dozens of investors. Most had passed. But one firm had seen the vision. They'd invited him for a final presentation. Seth had spent 2 weeks preparing, running scenarios, building demonstrations, perfecting every element. Julie had helped him practice his pitch in her apartment, asking hard questions, making him sharper. The day of the pitch, Julie sent him a text. You're going to change the world today. I believe in you. Seth walked into that conference room and delivered the presentation of his life. The investors had been skeptical at first. The technology was unproven. The market was uncertain. The capital requirements were massive. But Seth had been prepared for every objection. He'd shown them the prototype, demonstrated the growth rates, proved the water, savings, presented the market analysis that showed demand was exploding. The lead investor had leaned back in his chair. How does 50 million sound? Seth had kept his face neutral. That sounds workable. They'd shaken hands. Seth had called Julie the moment he left the building. I need to see you. Now. Julie had met him at their favorite coffee shop, worried by the urgency in his voice. Seth was already there, waiting, vibrating with energy. What happened? I got the funding. 50 million. They want to scale globally. Julie had screamed. Actually screamed. Other customers had turned to stare. She'd thrown her arms around Seth, kissing him in front of everyone, not caring who saw. Oh my God, Seth, this is incredible. This is everything you've worked for. Seth had pulled back to look at her. I need to tell you something else. Okay, I love you. Completely. Not just as a friend or a partner or someone I'm dating. I love you in the way where I want to build everything with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to grow old with you. I want it all. Julie had felt tears spill over. I love you too. So much it scares me sometimes. Don't be scared. I can't help it. Last time I loved someone, it destroyed me. I'm not Austin. Seth's voice was firm. I'm not going to hurt you the way he did. I'm not perfect, but I'm loyal. And I see you, really see you. And I choose you every single day. Julie had kissed him again, deeper this time, certain. When they pulled apart, she took his hand and placed it on her stomach. There's something I need to tell you too. Seth had gone very still. Are you pregnant? 10 weeks. His face had cycled through shock, joy, fear, wonder, landing on something that looked like pure happiness. We're having a baby. We're having a baby. Seth had dropped to his knees right there in the coffee shop, pressing his forehead to her stomach, tears streaming down his face. Other customers were definitely staring now. Neither of them cared. That night, they'd celebrated with sparkling cider and takeout Thai food, planning a future that felt suddenly, miraculously possible. Seth had proposed simply, no beach, no elaborate production, just the two of them in Julie's apartment. Marry me. Yes. That's it? No speech. Seth had smiled. I've been making speeches about you in my head for 6 years. I'm done talking. I just want to start building. Julie had said yes, and meant it with every cell in her being. Meanwhile, across the city, Austin Reed's life was collapsing in slow motion. After Seth sold his stake in Reed Bailey Technologies, the company had started falling apart. Projects Seth had been managing failed. Client relationships Seth had maintained dissolved. The operational backbone Seth had provided disappeared overnight. Austin had tried to hold it together, hiring new staff, taking on Seth's responsibilities himself, working 18-hour days. But Austin was a visionary, not an operator. He could see the future, but couldn't build the systems to get there. That had always been Seth's job. Within 6 months, Reed Bailey was hemorrhaging money. Investors were getting nervous. The tech blogs that had once praised them were now questioning their stability. Clients were leaving for competitors, and Austin was drinking. Every night, he'd sit in his penthouse with a bottle of scotch and scroll through Julie's social media. She'd blocked him personally, but her restaurant had an Instagram. Julie's table posted photos of dishes, of sold-out nights, of rave reviews. Austin would scroll through those photos and understand with perfect clarity that Julie was thriving without him. Better than thriving. She was flourishing, and he was drowning. He'd tried calling her. Her number was disconnected. He'd tried showing up at the restaurant. The staff had politely but firmly asked him to leave. He'd tried sending flowers. They'd been returned. He'd tried letters. No response. Julie had erased him from her life completely. And the worst part was that Austin couldn't even blame her. He'd done this. He'd destroyed the best thing in his life for something that meant nothing. Alice had disappeared to Los Angeles 6 months after the wedding, finally broken by Austin's cruelty and her own shame. She'd shown up at the penthouse one last time to get the things she'd left there. Austin had been drunk on the couch. I'm leaving, Alice had said. Moving to LA. Starting over. Good. Alice had stood there for a moment. I'm sorry. For everything. For what I did to Julie. For what I did to us. There was no us, Austin had said without looking at her. There was never an us. Then why did you keep sleeping with me? Because you were there. Because I'm weak. Because destroying my life slowly felt better than being alone with who I actually am. Alice had started crying. You're a terrible person. I know. I destroyed my best friend for you. No. Austin had finally looked at her. You destroyed your best friend for you. For your jealousy. For your need to have what she had. I was just the weapon you used. Don't put that on me. Alice had slapped him. Austin hadn't even flinched. She'd left without another word, and Austin had poured another drink. 18 months after the wedding disaster, Reed Bailey Technologies filed for bankruptcy. The company was sold for parts. Austin's shares, once worth hundreds of millions, were worth a fraction of that after lawsuits and settlements. Investors sued him personally. Clients sued for breach of contract. The empire he'd built crumbled because he'd prioritized ego over integrity. Austin's parents, ashamed and disappointed, stopped talking to him. His friends drifted away. He'd moved back to Connecticut to his childhood bedroom in his parents' basement, a 37-year-old failure living among participation trophies and yearbook photos from better days. The drinking had become constant, the depression clinical. Some nights, he'd scroll through photos of Julie and Seth that appeared in business journals. Tech innovator and celebrity chef, Chicago's power couple. Seth Bailey's sustainable farming startup goes public at $2 billion valuation. Julie Carter's restaurant empire expands to 3 locations. Every headline was a reminder of what Austin had lost. Every photo was proof that they'd built heaven without him. And the cruel truth that Austin finally understood was this: consequence was permanent. Some things, once destroyed, never came back. 2 years after the wedding that never happened, Seth and Julie got married. The ceremony was held in the rooftop garden of Seth's company headquarters, a building designed around sustainable technology and green spaces. 150 guests sat beneath market lights and flowering vines, people who actually mattered, people who'd watched them rebuild and refused to let betrayal define them. Julie wore ivory silk, simple, elegant, nothing like the Vera Wang gown that had symbolized a different life. Elena, their daughter, 20 months old, with her mother's eyes and her father's quiet intensity, sat on Julie's hip as she walked down the aisle. There was no maid of honor. That role had died in a previous life. But there was community, chef friends, investors, Brooklyn neighbors, Seth's family, Julie's mother, crying happy tears. Seth stood at the altar looking at Julie like she was oxygen. The vows were simple. I promise to show up, Seth said, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. I promise to trust you, Julie replied, with my heart, my dreams, my daughter, with all of me. When they kissed, Elena clapped. The crowd erupted in laughter and applause. The reception flowed into evening. Julie had catered it herself, a tasting menu that told their story through food. Seth gave a toast that made grown men cry. I spent years watching the woman I loved belong to someone else. I thought that was my story. The man who loved from a distance. But Julie taught me that sometimes the greatest love stories begin after the worst betrayals. That grace under fire is more beautiful than any fairy tale. That second chances are sacred. He raised his glass. To my wife, to our daughter, to the family we built from ashes. The applause was deafening. 3 months later, they moved into a penthouse overlooking the Chicago harbor, floor-to-ceiling windows. A kitchen Julie had designed herself. A nursery in soft yellow where Elena took her first steps. Seth's company had gone public, valuation exceeding $2 billion. Julie's restaurants had expanded to 3 locations, each one earning Michelin consideration. They'd built an empire, but more than that, they'd built a life. One evening, Julie stood in her restaurant kitchen plating dessert for a senator's anniversary dinner when her phone buzzed. A news alert. Austin Reed files for bankruptcy. She read it once, felt nothing, returned to her creme brulee. That evening, Seth came home with Elena, both covered in playground dirt and giggling. "Successful afternoon?" Julie asked, kissing them both. "We conquered the slide," Seth announced proudly. "Tell Mama what you said," Elena grinned. Brave. You are brave," Julie agreed, scooping her daughter up. Seth wrapped his arms around both of them. For a moment, they stood in their kitchen, this family built from wreckage and choice, and understood that this was victory. Not Austin's bankruptcy, not Alice's exile, but this, a daughter laughing, a husband present, a home filled with safety and love that was chosen daily rather than performed. That night, after Elena was asleep, Seth and Julie stood on their balcony watching the city lights. "Do you ever think about that day?" Seth asked quietly. "The wedding? Sometimes. Regrets?" Julie turned to face him. "Only that I didn't see you sooner, that I wasted time trusting the wrong people. You trusted with an open heart. That's not weakness. It felt like it. It was courage." Seth pulled her closer. "And look what your courage built." Julie leaned into him, into this man who'd loved her quietly for years, who'd shown up without expectation, who'd proven that real love was measured in daily choices rather than grand gestures. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For waiting, for seeing me, for building this with me." Seth kissed her forehead. "There's nowhere else I'd rather be." Behind them, through the window, Elena stirred in her sleep. Their daughter, their miracle, their proof that beauty could grow from ashes. And somewhere across the city, in a basement apartment, Austin Reed sat, alone scrolling through photos of a life he'd destroyed, understanding, too late, that consequences were permanent, that some choices destroy you completely, that grace once rejected doesn't return. But that wasn't Julie's story anymore. Her story was here, in this penthouse, in this marriage, in this family built on truth. Her story was victory. Family, let me tell you what this story is really about. It's not about betrayal, though betrayal happened. It's not about revenge, though karma was real. It's about grace. Grace under fire is the most devastating response to betrayal. Those who destroy your peace rarely find their own. Julie could have plotted revenge, could have exposed Austin publicly, could have ruined his reputation or his business or his life, but she didn't. She just walked away with her dignity intact and built something so beautiful that her betrayers could only watch from the sidelines and realize what they'd lost. That's power. That's victory. That's how you win when someone tries to break you. Seth waited 6 years for the woman he loved. He stood beside her when she was broken. He built with her when she was healing. And he loved her without expectation or demand. That's what real love looks like. Not the fireworks, the foundation. Austin and Alice destroyed themselves. Not because Julie cursed them. Not because she fought them. But because betrayal is a poison that kills from the inside out. When you betray the good-hearted, you don't just lose them. You lose yourself. Now, I want you to do something for me, family. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button. If you believe that grace defeats cruelty every single time, share this video. Comment where you're watching from, or just type, "I'm with you, Mr. Hearthline." I read every single comment, and your stories inspire mine. And if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe now, because I'm going to keep bringing you stories about people who refuse to let betrayal define them. Stories about second chances and sacred love, and the difference between performing life and actually living it. May you have Julie's grace when betrayal comes. May you find your Seth when you're ready to heal. May you know when to walk away from what breaks you. May you build beauty from ashes. And may you always, always choose people who choose you back. Until next time, family, remember, those who betray the good-hearted often destroy themselves. Walk away from what breaks you. Build with those who see your worth. And never, ever let someone else's cruelty steal your capacity for joy. This is Mr. Hearthline, reminding you that your story isn't over just because someone tried to end it. Your story is just beginning. I love you, family. I'm with you, and I'll see you in the next story.